Proszę Państwa, nim zaczniemy kolejną sesję, dwa komunikaty. Pierwszy komunikat dotyczy zmiany w programie. Po przerwie na lunch planujemy sesję równoległą. I tutaj zmiana. Sesja druga, która miała się rozpocząć...
Session 2, which was to begin at 2 p.m. Was switched over with session 5. So at 2 p.m. we'll begin the session on mobile telephony, while the online gaming session will begin at 3:15. The second announcement is that we found a set of car keys, and you can pick up the car keys at the registration desk. He didn't say what kind of a car it was.
Natomiast pozwolicie Państwo, że teraz przejdę
now I'll move on
właściwej
to
tej części programu.
Rozpoczynamy
kolejną sesję plenarną.
This is another plenary
Pierwsze
session.
wystąpienie na tej sesji będzie dotyczyło
And the first presentation
komórkowych czy mobilnego
about
internetu.
mobile telephony
and
the internet. Recently, we've been witnessing the development of the capabilities of mobile phones. Now, mobile phones give access to the internet. There's a number of internet services available. We can watch TV, we can check our email. There are social networking sites that we can access from our phone and everything, and a lot of other internet capabilities. So mobile wireless internet is developing rapidly. It's becoming cheaper, it's becoming more affordable, and kids are increasingly get access to mobile internet over their cell phones. And this is a challenge for institutions, for organizations, for professionals looking after kids' safety online, and this will be the topic of the presentation to be delivered by John Carr. Mr. Carr is an outstanding and eminent and experienced, renowned and recognized specialist in the field of internet safety. He is and was involved in so many projects in the UK and internationally, too many in fact to mention for a lot of time. But Mr. Carr is the secretary of the Coalition of Organized Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety, which is a British coalition or group of coalitions, and you'll find more about Mr. Carr in the conference materials. Without further ado, Mr. Carr.
Thanks. Good morning. It's nice to be back in sunny Warsaw, one of the few cities I ever go to that reminds me of London because of the weather. I just want to mention very quickly before I begin the logo on the left-hand side of the screen there, ENACSO. It's a new organization called the European NGO Alliance for Child Safety, and Nobody's Children Foundation here in Poland is an active member of it. It only came into existence on the 1st of September, so just a couple of weeks ago. And it's a brilliant, I think, a brilliant idea that the EU is funding to bring together children's organizations with a special interest in the internet from across the whole of the EU to share ideas, pass on best practice and experience, particularly in the field of lobbying, and dealing with the media, governments and industry and so on, but also therapeutically in terms of dealing with children who've been the victims of internet crimes, child abuse and so on. So watch out for it. Agnieszka is a very active member of it, one of our key members, and I'm also very, very involved in it. So, you heard just now that I am the secretary of an organization called CHIS, the Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety. There are the logos of all of the organizations that belong to CHIS. They are probably some of the best known brands in the field of child protection in the UK. And some of them are extremely old and venerable. For example, the organisation which I've been very closely associated with, NCH, the one in the bottoms of the screen, the red one. That was founded in 1869 by the Methodist Church, although today, for all practical purposes, it's an entirely secular organisation. But its concerns at the time, in the late 19th century, were the protection of children living rough on the streets of London without any parents. Over the years, it's changed into an organisation which is interested in and concerned with child protection issues across the board. So, like me and like all of these other organisations which you can see here, the work that we started to do around the protection of children and the internet grew very much out of work that we were doing with children who had been victimised, children who were being fostered and adopted into homes, and we wanted to make sure that the new homes they went to had internet connections, because it's now so important for children and young people in terms of their education, certainly in England. It's absolutely essential, really, to get a good education, to have the internet access at home. So our work was very much an organic growth from the other work that we were doing with children, rather than it being a new project that they just decided to get involved with. So, going backwards, never a good idea, or rarely a good idea. I don't know if here in Poland you had that advertisement for Martini, you know, the one that said, any time, any place, anywhere. That's the right time, it's the bright time, it's the Martini time. That was the basic idea. And that's essentially what the ambition of the internet industry and the mobile phone industry is now. We are to be liberated from the constraints of place. We are meant to be able to get access to all of our content, any of our content, anytime we want it, anywhere that we want it. And this is part of the broader convergence of the technologies that is happening in the digital environment. And there are two main focuses for that convergence in the consumer market: the home and the mobile. In the home, wireless networks focusing, I think, in the short to medium term on the TV. Increasingly, the TV will be an internet-enabled device. Increasingly, people will be using the television screen, at any rate, for at least part of the content which they access through the internet. And incidentally, I think in the long run, what that will mean is that the pressure to have a broader-based regulatory regime will increase, because parents and anybody in particular that's using the TV screen will be confused potentially if they're switching from one medium to the other on the same screen, in the same room, more or less at the same time. So I think in the medium to longer term, the fact of convergence of the technologies in the home, centering on the TV screen, I think is going to lead to new regulatory pressures. And the second area of convergence in the consumer market, of course, is the mobile, which is what we're going to be talking about this morning. And at the heart of mobiles, of course, are the telephone networks themselves. Since the mobile devices came into existence, they've constructed their own networks. Each company owns or leases a mobile phone network capable of delivering content in its own right. Generally speaking, up to now, they've delivered their own content. So they've become, in part, publishers, owners of the content which you've been able to access through the mobile phone networks. And so they've had a great commercial and legal and moral responsibility for all of the content which they themselves were supplying through their own network. They were generally taking a cut, some money, some revenue out of the content or services that they were publishing, and so obviously their responsibility was clear. But also, mobile devices increasingly have got Wi-Fi connectivity built into them. And if you have Wi-Fi in your device, of course, you have the capability of connecting, potentially at any rate, to any wireless internet network that might be within range of your device. And for many countries, I'm sure Poland isn't one of them, but mobile and wireless countries are providing the rapid route, the fast way of developing internet connectivity across the country, because the reason it's been relatively easy in the UK and in Europe for the internet to move in the way that it has is because there were already hundreds of miles of cables, telephone wires in the ground put there to help the telephone system develop. Well, of course, if you're in Africa or in parts of Asia, the cost and time that it would take to put those cables into the ground is simply impractical. But mobile, wireless technology, of course, offers a much faster route. And so we can see how, particularly in the developing countries, wireless technology is very, very likely to be the way in which internet connectivity is distributed rather within those countries. And we can also see, and now we're back in the West, we're back in London, we're back in Warsaw now, the way in which the mobile device is taking on an even larger role in many of our lives. In London, a couple of weeks ago, London Transport announced that they were developing a system which I've already seen working, by the way, in Hong Kong and a couple of other places around the world, where you'll be able to pay your bus fare by you get on the bus and just text, bang, you've paid your bus fare. You'll be able to buy your newspaper and a cup of coffee on the way into the tube station or before you get on the bus with your mobile. Tickets for the pictures and so on are also going to be accessible, payable for via your mobile device. So what this underlines again is the way in which the mobile device is becoming not just a technology, not just the means of accessing the internet, but an integral part of the way in which modern people live modern lives. You can already get TV on many of the mobile services that are available, but believe me, Ben-Hur on a screen this size, it doesn't work. On the other hand, watching Manchester United score a goal can sometimes be interesting if you're particularly if you're on a boring bus journey. And we've heard from Lukasz, of course, that most of the major social networking sites now have got a WAP-enabled site that means you can access most, not all. You can't do everything that's on a social networking site that you can do on a computer via a mobile because they simply aren't there yet. But once more, it does underline the direction of travel, the way in which all of this technology is going. And the capacity and power of the devices are increasing at an astonishing rate. I'll take my own mobile as an example. I am a bit of a nerdy geek, by the way, so it's not surprising I'm choosing mine. But here is my mobile phone. By the way, I don't have any shares in the company. This is not meant to be an advertisement for the device. But there in my hand, I have a device with 256 megabytes of memory, a standard 4 gigabyte storage space that could go up to 16 gigabytes. They're now available. 400 megahertz processor, that amount of RAM, 3 megapixels stills camera and video, which is not bad. It's quad band, so I can use it in any country in the world, including Japan. 3.5 megabytes download speed, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. It's got satellite. If I get lost in Warsaw, I can ask my telephone to tell me where I am. Get some interesting answers. Not that long ago, a computer in a school room or in your house with this capability would have been a high-end, expensive business machine. Tomorrow, every kid on the street is going to have something like this, or in fact, they'll be twice as powerful as this one already is. So, from a child protection perspective, of course, in the mobile era, everything potentially gets harder. And we need to focus very much, I think, on educational, developing educational programs to start talking about the onset of the mobile internet era. I'm sure in Poland it will be less difficult than in many other countries, because from the work I've seen, there's lots of exciting and excellent materials around children's safety on the internet already available and being distributed in schools and elsewhere. That is not the case in most countries of the world. It's certainly not even the case in most countries in Europe. We haven't succeeded in Britain, that's for sure. We haven't succeeded in the UK in getting out all of the messages that we need to all of the parents and teachers and so on that need to hear them, even in the old internet age, in the age where the computer was in a box, standing in a room, in a classroom, in a library, or in a child's bedroom. It's been hard enough. I mean, we've done some excellent work, I'm not saying that, but we haven't reached every parent, not by a long chalk. And it's going to be that much harder, therefore, to get the messages about the issues in the mobile space out to them, because that's a whole new challenge as well. I mean, at least when the computer was in a box, in a fixed place, in a fixed room, and it was big with a screen and things of that kind, parents could walk in to the room, or teachers could walk into the library, and they were there on hand to supervise, support, however you want to put it, children and young people's use of the device. If it was in school, there would almost certainly be, certainly in the UK, 100% of schools have got broadband access now, and 100% of that broadband access has got some very sophisticated filtering and monitoring software built into the network. It's every school. It's certainly not true in every home. But of course, once the internet goes mobile and once the internet is in your pocket, the possibility for that close supervision, that close support, help, whatever you want to call it, being provided by parents simply becomes redundant. It's no longer possible. So I think we're going to have to find ways of bringing the manufacturers of mobile devices more and more into the discussion about child safety in the mobile internet environment, not least because of their own expertise and the huge amount of resources which many of these large global companies have at their disposal. The European Union has brought together a group of some of the largest manufacturers. I've attended one meeting with Nokia, Motorola, Samsung and Sony Ericsson, but these discussions, I think, need to be revived and given a new sense of urgency as the mobile internet becomes more and more of an issue, because so far, except for that one meeting, the manufacturers of mobile handsets have been absent. They've just not been in the room when these discussions about children's use of the internet have been taking place. Now, in the UK, at the moment, it works like this. If you buy a new mobile phone handset in Great Britain, the automatic assumption is that the mobile device is being provided for a child. So whatever age you are, you walk into a shop, you buy a mobile phone for the first time, the automatic assumption is that you are under the age of 18. If you, and the reason for that is because they have a range of adult services, all of the mobile phone networks have a range of adult services which they supply themselves. So there's dating, there's gambling, there's chat, there's pornography, legal adult pornography. There's a range of things which each mobile phone company supplies, but they intend that material to be supplied only to adults. So the assumption is if you buy a new phone, you are a child. If you want to get access to any of those adult services, you must prove that you're an adult. And each company does it in a slightly different way. Some make it harder than others, but for example, if you're already a customer with Vodafone, you've been with them for 10 years and you've been paying from your bank account, and you go and buy a new Vodafone handset, they will automatically assume that you're over 18 and they'll put the adult service on. Others, like T-Mobile, for example, each time they will require you to prove that you're an adult before they'll turn on, before they will allow those adult services onto that account. So each of the networks do that. In the UK, we have a code of practice which we agreed with them, which obliges them to do that. In relation to internet connectivity, the picture is slightly different. In the case of Vodafone and in the case of T-Mobile and 3 and O2, which is owned by Telefonica now, they also automatically turn on an adult filter for any of the internet content that might be accessible via the device. So in other words, again, unless you prove to the company that you are over 18, you will not be able to access a range of adult websites over the internet. In the case of Orange, I think it is, they don't do that by default. They allow full access to the whole of the internet via their handset to everybody who buys one of their handsets and has an account with them. But you can get the adult filter turned on to the Orange service if you ask for it. But with the others, as I've said, the adult filter in relation to the internet is also turned on. So that's, I think, an example of a very good practice in the UK. And then in February of last year, so that's February 2007, at a European level, all of the mobile phone networks in Europe came together, and this was very much to the credit of the Commission of the European Union, that they were able to bring all of the key players from across the whole of Europe together. The mobile phone network signed up to a code of practice which is broadly similar to what we have in the UK. Not identical, but broadly similar. So I don't know exactly what the state of play is here with the mobile phone networks in Poland, but since the Polish mobile phone operators, I think, signed up, or their parent companies signed up to that code of practice, I would expect similar things to be happening here in Poland, either already or very, very soon. The problem, of course, comes with Wi-Fi, and I've already shown you my device. It's got Wi-Fi. I can log on to any available wireless network that might be around on the street. You can walk up and down the city of London. I'm sure you can walk up and down the streets of Warsaw, and you will still find lots and lots of places, this hotel, for example, where there is a Wi-Fi network available that requires no security and no login. And so you can get onto that network and do whatever you like. And if you're on that network, then of course any of the security, any of the filtering that your own network might have installed on your account or installed on your handset can become redundant. And it's another reason why the focus of the discussions around the mobile internet is going to shift more and more to the manufacturers to build more protective elements into the handsets themselves. And it's also a reason why a lot of the internet publishers, the suppliers of internet services and so on, are going to come under more pressure to do filtering, blocking, monitoring at network level. It's called in the cloud. The internet is now the cloud. That's where all the applications are going to be. That's what we're going to be using more and more to access material. And so there's going to be more and more pressure to get that right. Because as I said, there's no point in getting everything perfect on your own network if the device simply allows you to log into anybody else's network and then bypass all of the security elements in there. When when we first started talking about this issue a few years ago in the United Kingdom, we said to the mobile phone networks, hey, you guys, you need to start talking to the handset manufacturers because they're the ones that can build in the capacity into the device for monitoring, filtering, whatever it might be. And the networks all said, sorry, can't do it. We're not, we don't control what the handset manufacturers do. We only take what they supply us with in terms of hardware. So we went to see the handset manufacturers, and this was the meeting I referred to earlier that the Commission organised with all of those mobile phone companies. And guess what the handset manufacturers said? They said, sorry, nothing to do with us. We only supply what the networks ask us for. So, of course, the answer is somewhere between the two. It's a combination of the networks making demands of the manufacturers. It's also a question of the manufacturers developing products with safety in mind and with technical solutions in mind. The tracking capabilities of the hardware, particularly when linked to the internet, also present new risks which need to be thought about. And there are two broad classes of tracking services. First, active location services. So here I am, I'm in Warsaw, I've run out of money, I need to find an ATM to get some cash out of a hole in the wall. I can ask my device to tell me, here I am, where's the nearest cash point? Lots of services like that exist now. You want a Chinese restaurant, you want a petrol station, you can ask your phone to tell you where these services are now available. And with its links to the satellite or just with its links to the mobile phone network, that information can come back to you fairly quickly. I don't have a problem, in principle at any rate, with these types of services, which are called active location services, because you, the user, are in control. You decide what information you want. You decide when you want it. You are in control of the entire transaction. There is, however, a class of tracking services called passive location services, which are initiated by a third party. Now, in the UK, a number of companies sprang up to provide tracking services for children. So, in other words, they were saying to parents, your child is, of course, constantly in danger of being kidnapped. If you want to show that you really love your child, buy one of our services on the mobile phone, and then if your child is kidnapped, you'll immediately be able to find them, and what a good parent you are. Of course, it was all rubbish, but nonetheless, that was the sort of emotional message that they were trying to get out. And it's based simply on this. As you, some of you are probably already familiar with this, and I apologize, but when you turn on your mobile phone for the, each time, basically what happens, it sends a signal out looking for the cell of the network that you belong to. If it finds a cell, it says, hello, this is 07961 367 960, I'm here in this area, in this cell area. And so the network registers your physical presence, or the physical presence of it's actually your SIM card. It's not really the handset, it's the SIM card. It registers the physical presence of your SIM card in that particular geographical area. And you walk down the street and you move to the next cell and so on and so forth. So it always knows where to send a phone call if one comes for that number. But of course it also knows physically where the SIM card is. And so what some companies in the UK were doing was selling information about where somebody else's SIM card was. And as I said earlier, some companies specifically focused on telling parents where their children were. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, let's leave on one side. But what we discovered was that the security systems attaching to issuing or providing that type of tracking service in the first place were not, at least initially, as good as they could have been. Several journalists, in fact, they gave other people's telephone numbers and were able to track them without them having any knowledge at all that they were being tracked. Some wives put their husbands' mobile phones on a tracking service, and they rang them up Friday night. Where are you, darling? I'm in the tennis club. Oh, the tennis club on the west side of the city. Yeah, that one. Oh, you liar. You're on the east side of the city. So we've already had a few divorces in the UK, which you can put, at least in part, down to the availability of this new technology. But more seriously, for example, where you have violent husbands and the wife and children need to get away to a refuge so that the man can't find them and continue to act in a violent way. If one of the children's telephones or if the wife's telephone has been put on a tracking service, of course, then the whole idea behind the anonymity of these places can be completely shattered. So there are a range of issues around the tracking capabilities of mobile phones, particularly when linked to the internet, because, by the way, if you want to know where the person is, you can do it in one of two ways normally. You can either go to a website and say, where is this telephone now? Or you can ask for a text message to be sent to you, telling you where this text message is now, and where that telephone is right now. And in the case of some of the services that were being supplied, some of the tracking services, you could also ask it to tell you where that person was at 10-minute intervals for the previous 24 hours. So the tracking capabilities of the technology, particularly when linked to the internet, were very, very significant. The thing about mobile phones, however, is that they do rely upon the availability of a GSM network, of a telephone network, to get and receive a telephone signal. All of the new devices in the United States now, and in Japan, and increasingly in Europe, this is an example, also have a GPS component built into them, which means that you can communicate your tracking through a satellite. So anywhere you are in the world, anywhere on the surface of the planet, in theory, is trackable and is readable if there is a GPS component to it. And when you combine, it's called GPS assisted, when you combine the capabilities of the telephone network with the GPS element of the device, you've got an extremely powerful tracking tool, because satellite won't work inside buildings because of the glass and concrete that gets in the way, but of course mobile phone signals will. So you've got quite substantial capability. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes, okay, that's good. Perfect timing then. So I'll just finish up with one story about this tracking capability and the way in which telephones, particularly when linked to the internet, have got a great capacity as surveillance tools. In the UK, a company brought out a new telephone which they called a teddy phone, and it looked just like a teddy bear, and I didn't like it much, but it was perfect. It was aimed at, when I asked the manufacturers, who were you aiming at? She said, we're aiming for the under-7s market. And of course, I didn't know there was an under-7s market until then. But so this would be exactly the kind of device that would appeal to a young child. So what this could do, however, was a lot more than an ordinary telephone. A parent could send a text message to this teddy phone. No bell would ring, no sound, no vibration, nothing. The text message would turn on the telephone. So in other words, the telephone became a listening device. The parent could hear any conversation that was going on within the ambient area of the telephone device. Now, teachers, nursery assistants, other parents, other children, completely unaware of the fact, potentially, that somebody outside the classroom, somebody on the other side of the earth, for that matter, could be sitting there listening to and recording all of the conversations, all of the things being said within range of that device. There was another one which was created by Nokia, as it happens, that could do exactly the same thing, but it could also turn on a TV camera, so it could listen and watch. I have to say, in the case of the Nokia device, at least a red light flashed. So once the device was being turned on, it was possible, everybody ought to be able to see it. Although I've seen this done, you can arrange things so that the red light is covered up, and so the ability to listen and see what's happening remotely exists without necessarily the people in the room knowing about it. And again, these devices are all linked to the internet, and so you've got the possibility of remote surveillance and remote listening without the people at the other end necessarily knowing about it. So whilst we think about the internet as a connectivity, as simply a route, a means to getting content, increasingly it's going to be impossible to divorce that connectivity from the types of hardware and the types of services that are being provided through it and by it. And so we need to be aware of these issues because they clearly raise all kinds of child protection, child security issues, as well as issues for our society as a whole. I do not want to live in a country where anybody can bug me, you know, anybody can just turn on and listen to my conversations. I went into one of the spy shops. Actually, in Britain, we're very open about these things. There is a shop, it's called the Spy Shop, and it's just off Oxford Street in London. If you see me later, I'll give you the precise address. And I said about it was a similar device to the Teddyphone, not actually the Teddyphone, but a similar device. And I said, aren't there any laws about this kind of thing? She said, oh, yeah, there are laws. I mean, if you listen in on somebody's conversation, you can't use that information in a court of law as evidence because you need to have a device. You need to have a warrant. You need to have a subpoena, you know, to be able to bug for these purposes in order to be able to use it. And generally, of course, only the police and the state can get them. So she said, but of course, most of our customers, they're not bothered about that. All they want to know is what's happening. All they want is the information which they can act on rather than necessarily produce it in a court of law. So there are wider issues involved in these types of things as well. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Let's wait for the questions, maybe. Czy macie Państwo pytania do prelegenta związane z...
Do we have any questions to our speaker about mobile telephony or perhaps British solutions in this respect? Please make sure that you use the microphone.
I'm from Slovakia. I'm a child psychologist, and I would like to ask you if there are some measures in UK with regards to how children can use mobile phones in the education process, because there in Slovakia now there is a big campaign to somehow to restrict using of mobile telephones during the education process, because children are very smart, you know, they are writing some exercise or some task, and they can consult with other peers, and this is quite dangerous sometimes, and you cannot get objective results. So if there is some restriction in the education system. Thank you.
A number of head teachers in British schools tried to ban mobile telephones from being brought onto the premises. Didn't work. All they created was a whole new set of problems trying to police bringing mobile telephones onto the school. into the school rather. I mean, ChildNet did an interesting project a few years ago, might have been before Will was there actually, where they were showing how mobile phones could be integrated into the learning processes. They were using the cameras to take, on field trips, they were taking pictures of flowers and toads and other disgusting things, and sending them back to the class and taking notes and that kind of thing. So there have been a limited number of projects which have tried to demonstrate the positive value of mobile devices in the educational process. But in the main, the issues around mobile phones in schools have been about policing it. We've had this phenomenon, you've heard it many times mentioned, of mobile phone bullying, text messaging, sending horrible messages to other kids, cheating in the way that you were just saying, you know, sending answers to children during exams. We've had cases where they've used a mobile phone to take a video of a child being beaten up, or of some sexual activity, or somebody going to the toilet, you know, things of that kind, sending it around the school, and it can have very, very damaging and bad effects. So there's a lot of activity around the whole bullying phenomenon, the whole bullying issue in the schools. But attempts to ban them, they don't work. Lots of parents actually get very anxious about that. Parents are buying mobile phones for their children so they can stay in touch with their children. They want to be able to let them know, I'm late from work, you know, I won't be home, get your own dinner, you know, that kind of thing. And so they don't like the idea of the mobile phones being banned from schools.
Czy macie Państwo jeszcze pytania? Tutaj jest mikrofon bliżej tego. A nie działa? Czy jest włączony? No dobra, to przekazać.
Okej. Może nie pytanie, tylko uściślenie, jak to wygląda w Polsce, lokalizacja użytkowników w sieci GSM. Niektórzy operatorzy udostępniają taką usługę w Polsce i wiele firm korzysta z tego. Funkcja polega na tym, że do operatora wysyła się określony kod poprzedzony numerem telefonu, którego lokalizację chce się otrzymać. Użytkownik tamtego telefonu musi wyrazić zgodę, potwierdzając innym kodem. I wtedy operator żądającemu użytkownikowi przekazuje informację, gdzie dany klient się znajduje. W mieście jest to dokładność około 50-100 metrów, natomiast w terenie około pół kilometra. Czyli taka funkcjonalność lokalizacji w Polsce istnieje i wiele, może niewiele, kilka firm z tego korzysta. Odnośnie lokalizacji poprzez GSM, to mam praktyczny przykład z życia wzięty, mojego osobistego. Syn studiujący w Edynburgu posiada telefon podobny do prezentowanego z GSM-em. Uzupełniony o Google Maps i małą aplikację pozwala mi na to, że z dokładnością do kilkudziesięciu metrów wiem, gdzie syn znajduje się w Edynburgu. Oczywiście bywają zaniki, bywają okresy, kiedy nie wiem gdzie, ale to nie wynika już z pokrycia i wadliwej działania aplikacji, tylko...
The application is faulty, but there are other reasons, if you will. However, we have such applications in Poland already. In Poland, it's with a margin on half a kilometer that we can locate the person with. I don't know what the reason for that is.
I'm very glad to hear about the way you do it in Poland. In the UK, the location services only required you to consent at the beginning, but then you didn't know when they were tracking you afterwards. So that's the really and that's still the case, by the way. They still work in the same way. So if you can forge the person's consent in the beginning, and the journalists I mentioned, they did that, then of course you're tracking somebody without their knowledge at all. So we have a code of practice which introduced a very high level of security in the first phase in terms of tracking who the person is. I'm sure your son, by the way, will be delighted to know that his dad can track him all the time whilst he's at university. But I've got a bit of bad news for you. I did the same with my son until I discovered that he always leaves his mobile phone in the library.
Proszę Państwa, już mamy jeszcze czas na jedno pytanie, jeżeli ktoś z Państwa ma pytanie do zadania.
Any other questions?
Jeżeli nie ma więcej pytań,
All right,
to
if there are no
jeszcze
more
raz bardzo
questions,
dziękuję
then
za
thank you again
wystąpienie.
for this very interesting presentation.